All right, folks. So we're going to review where you've gotten to so far in your government unit, which is the Articles of Confederation, which I am sad to say did not work out for everyone, and then the resulting Constitutional Convention. So let's get started. Okay, so as we know, during the American Revolution, they created the Articles of Confederation. This was our first government, and the main theme of this government is whatever the British did, we definitely don't want to do because we don't like the British and we don't want a government anything like the British. So we have the following features that were part of the Articles of Confederation. So first main thing we're going to have is no president, and whenever the reason why we have no president is because we want to, again, we don't want to be like Great Britain, so we don't want anybody that can be anything like a king that can take away all of our rights and be mean to us like King George III. So no president. Unfortunately, with this, you have no figurehead, and it turns out into some other problems later on. All right, next feature that's going to be a huge issue is we can't collect taxes in the national government. And as you can remember from the American Revolution, the reason why we can't collect taxes in the national government is because, again, Great Britain, no taxation without representation. That should ring a bell for you. We didn't want to do that to people and make them collect money. Unfortunately, whenever your country can't collect money, your country can't take care of you and the infrastructure. So that's going to be an issue. All right, next thing that's going to be an issue, and they thought was great at the time, is going to be no standing army. The reason why we didn't want a standing army is we didn't want a national government that had this big group of soldiers with weapons and guns that could come and take away all of our rights. What we didn't realize is that this is probably going to be an issue if anybody tries to attack us and we have no army to protect us. Another problematic issue in the Articles of Confederation is if you wanted to make any changes, for example, if you thought, maybe we should be able to collect taxes because we need money. If you tried to pass that law, you had to have all 13 states approve to even change the Constitution. Problem with that is you always have that one state that always wants to be the stick in the mud, and they want to make sure that nothing can get changed because they just like to be that person. My guess is it'd probably be Rhode Island, just because that's just how Rhode Island is. So if you want to change anything, everybody's got to agree. So another feature of the Articles of Confederation was that the national government could not ask for money from the states. The reason why we have this in here is because we wanted the states to have the final authority in what happens, and they didn't want to be controlled by the national government. As you can tell, this will be a major issue whenever we are needing money to pay our debts, especially our debts from the war, and we can't get money from taxes and we can't get money from states unless they want to send us money. I'm sure that's like you would love to send somebody money that's your own. Probably not, right? Okay, so we went through all these issues that are in the Articles of Confederation. It wasn't an issue until we got to around 1787, and then there was what was the Shaes Rebellion. So Shaes Rebellion. Daniel Shaes was an American Revolution veteran. He was a farmer, and he got a little fed up because all the money that they had to use to pay for their debts was actually worthless. So whenever they tried to pay their debts, they had nothing to pay it with. And so they get mad, Daniel Shaes and a couple of other farmers, they get mad. They storm the courthouse, they close it down, they go to the arsenal, seize some weapons, wreak havoc for a while, and all the while, one of the issues, as you recall from the Articles of Confederation, we have no army ready to go stop this rebellion. So this rebellion's going on. The our heads of government and our forefathers, they get a little worried that we can't do anything about it. So this shocks everybody into opening a convention to edit, or what they thought edit, the Articles of Confederation. So we get to the Constitutional Convention, as we see with our lovely picture right here. So some things I want to point out about the Constitutional Convention. This is going to happen in 1787. You want to remember that year. That's one of those years you have to remember. Something else you might want to remember is this guy right here. He is going to be not the first president yet, but he is the president of the convention. So he's kind of important to know. Some other things, most of your guys that are at this convention are lawyers. About a third of them own slaves. Here's Ben Franklin, just because I like to point out Ben Franklin because he's really cool. So these are just some little tidbits going into the Constitutional Convention. At first they thought, we're just going to edit the articles, and then they realized they were terrible, and they decided to scrap them and start a new constitution. So some of the things we're going to have to argue about, of course, because politicians have to argue. we have to argue about how are we going to take care of a few things in our government, such as how are we going to have the people represented in our government. First option to look at for representation was called the Virginia Plan. Now, one thing I want you to remember from your 13 colonies is Virginia is a big state. And when you are a big state, you can have lots of people potentially live in your state. So, Virginia Plan calls for 3 branches of government. They want 2 houses, or what they call a bicameral legislature, and they want representation based on the state's population. So Virginia, who could potentially have a whole lot of people, would end up having more representatives than, say, Rhode Island. So this favors the large states because they end up getting more people to represent them in Congress, and then they can pass more laws that benefit the bigger states. The other plan we have is the New Jersey plan. And I want you to remember about New Jersey is it is a small state and not a lot of room for your population to grow. They want 3 branches of government. They want a unicameral or one-house legislature, and they want every state to have 1 vote. So whether you're little old New Jersey or big old Virginia, you all have the exact same vote. Whether you have 1 million people living in your state or 50,000 people living in your state, you all have the same vote. So as you can see, there's not going to be much of an agreement on one or the other, so we're going to have to each give in a little and come up with a compromise. So that's when we come up with the Great Compromise. This is giving a little bit of the best from the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. We're going to have 3 branches of government. We're going to have 2 houses in Congress. 1 house is going to have a representation based on population, and that's your current House of Representatives. And then you're also going to have your 1 house that has equal representation, and that's going to be the Senate, where every state gets 2 senators. So if you're a large state, you're going to be benefiting from the House of Representatives, and if you're a small state, you're going to probably like the Senate. And so thus is the Great Compromise. Another argument that's going to be had during the Constitutional Convention is how are we going to count slaves in the population? You have some states where half of the people living in the state are slaves. But if you recall, or maybe you will recall after you learn about the Civil War, is the South considered slaves to be property and not people. Unless they needed more people to get more representatives in Congress, because then that gives them more power. So then they said during the argument for how slaves are to be counted, they wanted slaves to count as people because, they're people. And the North said, nope, you've said they're property all these years. We're going to count them as property. They don't get to count in your population for representation. So then we come up with the 3/5 compromise. And that's where slaves count as 3/5 of a person when determining a population for how many representatives you get for a state. It's still kind of messed up. You're going to count a person as 3/5 of a person. But that's better than just saying they're property, right? The other part of your compromise is going to be that the slave trade ends in 20 years from the Constitution. So around 1808, we're going to stop importing slaves from Africa. Naturally, you're going to have people that are going to be for ratification or approval of the Constitution, and you're going to have people that are against it. Your Federalists who are for it say it's going to give you a strong central government, and it's going to give you an opportunity to protect your country. You're going to have a chance to have a standing army. You're going to have a chance to earn revenue such as that. And then you also have your anti-federalists who thought that they thought that the central government was too strong in the Constitution, and they were worried about it taking away rights, and they said that there wasn't enough to protect the rights of citizens in the Constitution. So these are going to be the arguments coming into ratification of the Constitution. And again, there's going to be your compromise that's going to kind of meet in the middle is they are going to pass the Bill of Rights. Once the Bill of Rights are passed, then you have most of your anti-federalists on board with the Constitution. So that's just a bit of a rundown on what you've learned so far with the Articles of Confederation and the Constitutional Convention. Hopefully this kind of sums up everything for you.